So in the last video, I've announced that I will move to a new country, to a new place. I will basically leave behind my studio in Berlin. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through my absolute minimalist setup that I use when I'm traveling and still want to work professionally on music, mixing, mastering, producing stuff, and also making these videos. And this is an honest look behind the scenes of what is the stuff that I'm actually using, why am I using it, and what can you maybe take away from that as well. Now, if you've missed the last video, I highly recommend you watch it over here, because in this video, I explained the reasons why I'm making this move, the lifestyle design choices, the consequences, and how I'm planning to do these things in the future. Let's get into the weeds here and talk about what my mobile setup actually looks like. Okay, so this is the studio that I'm currently in. Studio. It's a bare bones room with no acoustic treatment at all. I don't even brought speakers, like no chance. And this is the lamp that I currently always bounce against. And I think my head is like getting bruises every single day. Okay, let's get started and talk about the stuff that I'm using, why I'm using it, and what you can maybe take away from that. Let's maybe start with the heart of everything, which is a MacBook Pro. Pretty easy. I'm using the M3 Pro. There's a lot of discussions which exact model fits best with what DAW. I think all of this is just talk that distracts from the actual facts. Like, the machines are insanely fast, it's super easy to use, and the specification that I've chosen is actually pretty minimalist and for a MacBook still quite affordable. So I'm using this with the standard 18 gigabits of RAM configuration, and so far this has been more than enough. Just the way it addresses that RAM seems to be so efficient that I never run into any problems. Even if I load in a ton of samples, it's like always enough. There might be some special use cases for people who work with orchestral libraries where you need more than that. But in my experience so far, these 18 gigabyte of RAM were absolutely fine. Now, in terms of the storage, I also went with the absolute minimum version. So I went for 500 gigs. This is where Apple actually charges a lot of extra bucks if you want to have more than this. Now, I'm using 3 different DAWs actually overall. So I'm using Ableton for producing, I use Cubase for mixing, and I use Wavelab for mastering. All 3 DAWs performed absolutely flawlessly so far. And even with complex sessions with a ton of effects, like, the CPU is insane. There's just no reason why this would ever break down. Yeah, so I haven't run into any issues whatsoever. If you do complex video editing, you might want to have like a higher spec version, but for audio stuff, so far this has been super stable. So this has been my experience with the MacBook Pro so far. Now, you probably ask yourself, like, how does he deal with the storage? Because 500 gigs is just definitely not enough for all the projects that I'm working with. And I actually came across a really cool option. So I have a couple of dongles and like USB hubs and stuff hooked up. Actually, not too much. So this is just 2 hubs, this one and this one. This storage here, this is basically the heart of where all my data sits. This is an enclosure by Satechi. So I'm not sponsored or anything. I bought this with my own money. And this is an M2 SSD enclosure, or NVMe enclosure. So I'm not a super tech guy with computer stuff. So if I get something wrong, please don't blame me. So all you have to do is you buy a super fast SSD drive. There are some recommended brands. I bought one of them. You literally just flip the thing in and it works out of the box. That's super fast. So there have been tests that show that this is actually even faster than the internal storage sometimes, which is amazing. And it's definitely faster than anything you can buy off the shelf in terms of storage. This has been like a great investment so far. So all my projects sit on this. All the programs that I install obviously sit on the machine itself. And this has been super reliable. Now, the cool thing is that I used to need many more different dongles when I was still like in previous versions of Cubase and Wavelab. They had their own dongle. Now they are dongle-less, which is great. I still, for some plugins, I need the iLok. Apart from that, mouse and keyboard are connected via Bluetooth, so there's actually not too much that I need to connect. What is still connected back here to this one is the cam link. And the cam link is basically the thing that brings the HDMI signal from the camera directly into the computer, so I can record everything directly into OBS. That's the video recording software that I use. And yeah, so overall, that's basically the computer setup. I can walk you through keyboard and mouse quickly. So this is like a Logitech MX Keys, and this is the MX Ergo or something. It's called trackball mouse. This takes a little bit of time to get used to, but since I've used this for like 3-4 years now, actually I never had any wrist pain anymore. And I also don't get pain in the thumb. So it's very, very comfortable. It's literally ergonomic, which is why they call it MX Ergo. It works quite well. You just have to clean that trackball quite a bit, so it gets a little bit of dusty inside and then doesn't perform anymore. I sometimes use these like extra functions to open specific folders that I need to have access to all the time, but apart from that, super easy. Now the keyboard, I'm going to replace it with just a newest generation Mac keyboard, like this Magic Keyboard that has the Touch ID, because it annoys the hell out of me that I have to reach over here to use the Touch ID function to, for example, open my password manager or whatever. And if I instead have it like right where the keys are, it's just much more ergonomic. And I also think I'm going to trim this down to like a smaller version. Let's go to the audio gear. So what type of interface am I using? So this is an RME ADI to DAC FS. This is like a mastering grade converter. One of the best ones you can get currently on the market. I've had this for a few years now. It's still really up to date and like has the newest technology. There are mastering converters you can get for like 10,000 bucks. And I don't think that's worth it at all. I think RME is one of those brands where you actually get bang for buck. I mean, they are costly, so a few grand is typically something you have to invest, or at least 1,000 into a good mastering converter. But this is such great quality in terms of the build, the components, in terms of obviously how it sounds. They're just really, really cutting edge and upfront on how they design things with the user in mind. And yeah, it's just a no bullshit company. I've used RME interfaces for many years. Also, I'm currently not sponsored or endorsed by them. I just can testify to the quality. I've used a lot of different interfaces in the past. When I was working as a freelance tutor at a music production university here in Berlin, I've used very different converter setups, very different studios, and they all had strange, weird crashes all the time, especially when switching users and stuff. The RME stuff was never the problem. This is so insane. I don't know how they do it, but it's also the software side of things that just seems to work much better. And so this is why I keep recommending them. They're just great quality. There's nothing too fancy going on in this setup. The cool thing is that it has this like little visualizer built in, which is sometimes quite handy. In my studio setup in Berlin, I have this like put right below the screen, so I can obviously take a look at this meter, but it's not necessary. I still think they did a really good job at this. Little pro tip for you, always try to listen at more or less the same level, because your ears psychoacoustically get calibrated in a way to the level that you're listening to. And obviously you have really good metering here on how loud you're actually listening. And you obviously have to adjust. If you're working on a finalized master, you need to adjust for that compared to if you're working on just like a single track in a mix. But if you memorize these numbers and how it feels, that's actually a really good trick to get to better mixes. So this little guy here, that's actually something that I got as a present when I was on tour with my band. So we were in Düsseldorf playing with a legendary punk rock band, and a girl gave this to me after the show because she enjoyed the music and said it's going to bring me luck in the future. And so this little guy stuck with me for, I don't know, like 15 years or more, 20 years, I don't know exactly. So let's get over to the headphones. So a lot of people ask me about what type of headphones I'm using. These are the Odyssey LCDX Creators Edition. These are planar magnetic drivers inside. This is like a proprietary patented technology that they're using, as far as I know. I can only say about these headphones, yes, they are costly. So like $1,000, $1,200 is what you typically pay on the market. Now, transparently, I have to say that I'm very soon to be endorsed by them. So I'm just wanted to share this. It's not like set in stone right now. They're going to sponsor the coaching program. So also the students get better access to these at a discount. But yeah, these are headphones that I can really recommend. And the cool thing is I don't use them with any like acoustic correction software. So for a lot of like entry model headphones, I actually recommend pairing them with Sonarworks or other correction software, because it literally can make a $150 headphone sound like $300. But if you invest into something at this quality level, it just doesn't make sense anymore, because in my experience, at least, they start to sound worse when you use something like Sonarworks. I don't know exactly why that is. Odyssey actually put up a really interesting article that I will hopefully don't forget to link below or show here on the screen somewhere. This article goes into detail why they don't really recommend using Sonarworks with their like high-end models. I don't know about the technical details, but I can tell from first-hand experience experience when comparing A and B. They just sound better without, for whatever reason. So I'm using them as they are. They sound fantastic, and I work on really big records also remotely, and it literally doesn't matter if I am on these headphones or if I am on my studio speakers, which I will also make a video about quite soon. What I want to say to you is, if you want to work remotely, investing in a really, really good pair of headphones, like spending as much as you can on that front, is a good move. If you pair this with a great interface, it doesn't have to be like a mastering great interface, but if you pair it with a good sounding, decent build quality interface that is reliable, and you have a computer that just lives up to the demands that you have for it, so you can work without any hassle, without any like hiccups, then you can pretty much work from anywhere you want in music professionally these days. Now, there are a couple of other things that might be interesting to you that I can share with you. For example, I'm using an iPad Pro with a Magic Keyboard quite heavily. This is not one of the recent models, so it's also a couple of years ago when I bought this. But I find this super handy when traveling, when on the road, to just, for example, do emails when I'm on a train or something. This is still from a time where I was on a desktop PC and I wasn't using the MacBook. Like right now, I'll probably just only get this and not worry too much about the iPad. But what I still find super handy is to just do signatures or fill out certain documents, like legal documents, bureaucratic stuff. It's just so easy to import into something like GoodNotes, which is like a note-taking, like manual note-taking software. And you can just use the pen with that. This is quite handy, or also to just draw something for videos or explain something to people. And apart from that, what I also heavily use is just a Kindle, because I like reading. I like to get better at things, especially something like productivity, business books, all that kind of thing. Once you start building your own thing, you get into this rabbit hole of self-development. For this is quite handy. I can just export all the things that I've marked, create a database in a program like Notion, for example, import that, and then review my notes. So this is quite interesting. Yeah, in terms of software setup, that's maybe also something that's interesting to you. So besides the DAWs, I organize pretty much everything in Notion. This is, for example, my content pipeline of new videos that I'm making. So this is coming up soon. Apart from that, I just use the Google Suite for pretty much everything. So the Google Workspace Gmail version, I use the Google Calendar, and this is pretty much everything you need. So I don't have like a super fancy setup. And I think if you get too complex with the type of tech setup you use, you actually procrastinate and you don't get anything done. So my experience, it's much more effective to stay simple and to rely on the habits that you build, to know the couple of tools that you use really well. And this also applies to music production. So I've actually made a video about 10 plugins that I use quite a lot currently. So this is still valid. A couple of new additions are coming in all the time. But I can just generally give you a rundown of like overall the types of brands that I'm using. I have this Plugin Alliance subscription. Once again, like I'm not affiliated with them, but this is from all the subscriptions out there, the one where I feel I get the most bang for buck. So a huge variety of things that I can use if I need to, but also the couple of ones that I really use constantly are really good. And from time to time, a new tool enters into this subscription and I keep using it much more. So for example, Kive, so Kiive, they introduced something that is an emulation of the Distressor, like this legendary compressor, Distressor it's called. This has been modeled a couple of times by other companies. I like this version quite a lot, and it's very flexible. And it's made it into my arsenal of stuff that I use again and again in mixes right now. So this is really nice. Apart from that, obviously I still use the FabFilter Pro L2, really good stuff. I also think that overall the Ozone suite is quite good in terms of the mastering stuff. Other companies that I like a lot is Softtube. Softtube, in my experience, make a lot of great stuff. They're actually the only reason why I keep on using the iLock. Otherwise I wouldn't use this freaking dongle. I could get rid of it. I think I also need it for the Superplate plugin. So Superplate is one of my favorite plugins. This is also, I think, tied to the iLock. Apart from that, Tokyo Dawn Records or Tokyo Dawn Labs is the plugin division of that. TDR, wow, really good stuff. The Kotelnikov compressor is amazing. The new Prism analyzer is amazing. The new filters, the infrasonic filter, for example, that they created is absolutely stunning, and they're really affordable plugins, but developed on a really high level. So this is some of the stuff that I'm currently using and I can highly recommend. But to be honest with you, for 90% of producers, it's probably absolutely sufficient to stick with the standard tools that are inside your DAW. If I lose my iLog or some subscription doesn't work and I get a new job in for the studio to mix or to master, honestly, I couldn't care less. I literally would go into the stock tools and get a relatively similar result and maybe get the trial subscription of a good limiter if I'm on Ableton, because their limiter just still to this day, I don't know, it just sounds sounds bad. It's like not possible to make it work for mastering for contemporary loudness levels at least. But yeah, apart from that, I would be fine. It's much more about the skills, about the confidence that you develop. And let me know in the comments if you want more videos like this where I walk you through certain things. I can also walk you through some stuff, how I record these tutorial videos that I typically do. If that's interesting to you, leave a comment below and I will see you in the next video.